Hello.
Hi, Mr. Price. This is Darren Paltrowitz, your 12 o'clock interview.
Hi, Darren. How are you?
Great, and yourself?
I'm good, thank you.
Still a great time for you to chat?
Oh, yes.
Okay, great. So Cary connected us. He spoke the world of you, of course. And first, I want to ask you about your new album. Where did the idea come from to make a new album?
I was at the cutting room here in the city, and the crowd was so enthusiastic about what the show was. I said, maybe I should do this again. But my first motivation was I went to hear Gordon Edwards band. You know, they band in the 60s here in New York, and they were called Stuff. Well, the guitar player in that band, Mick Gaffney, I think he could make a man with no tongue try to sing. He played so well.
Wow.
And that was part of the motivation for me to say, well, you know what? I could do this again. And along with a guy called Ronald Jones in New Orleans, he had sent me 2 demos, whereas he upgraded I'm Walking by Fats Domino and Blueberry Hill. So I said, well, you know what? I could take these and arrange them in a way where they'll sound just like it's new music. So I worked on the album for 2 years. I recorded 27 tunes to get 10. And I wanted to make sure that each song had the flavor of rock and roll as we knew it in the past, yet contemporary instrumental hits that people would recognize and could not be embarrassed as that old saying, oldie but goodie. They're all very strict and well thought out 10 songs that in This Is Rock and Roll.
Sure. Now, you recorded most of it in New Jersey, is it? Or did you record it in Westchester?
No, at City Lights. Guy Daniels down in Freehold, New Jersey.
Got it. Now,
but we also did work in Nashville, Atlanta, and Sugar Hill Studios, you know, just to get certain songs we felt needed different kind of vibes. I'm talking about the mix and the engineers who did it. And I don't know if Cary sent you a record, but most of those guys are recognized in the book. I think we used maybe 125 people to do this project.
Right. I can't imagine that was easy to put everything together. But when you were recording initially or thinking of doing the album, was it just going to be all in one studio, or did it evolve to something bigger?
Well, actually, each time I recorded something, I thought about what and where would be the next best place to do it. Because different engineers in different studios have a different kind of motivation and quality in terms of how they feel and how you feel about the room. You know, it's almost like getting conditioned for a fight. If you don't feel it, you know nobody else is going to feel it, because all we're projecting is sound. So I tried to be as comfortable as possible in terms of the mix and the vocals of way I recorded it and the way I did it.
So how did you become a Westchester guy?
Well, I got married again. I married one of my best friends. We had been friends for 20 years, and we decided to get married. So I've been in Westchester now for about 22 years, up in Paltrowitz.
So she's originally from Westchester, or you to spend a lot of time?
Oh, she's originally from Maryland, from Baltimore, but she lived in New York, Jacqueline.
And at what point in your life did you leave Louisiana?
Oh, right after Lord and Miss Claudia. I was a teenager, probably 19 years old.
Well, so when was your first time in New York?
Now, I was 19 years old at the Apollo Theater. That must have been 1953.
Wow. So Coming from Louisiana to New York in that era, were you intimidated originally by New York?
Oh, I couldn't tell you. It was a very frightening, emotional thing. You got to imagine a guy raised up in the country and coming to New York City. I mean, it was absolutely an experience I never will forget. I mean, our language, coming from Louisiana back in those days, where you're speaking half that patois, it's almost like coming from Haiti today and trying to get along in New York City. And come y'all, hey boy, where you going by? The tone and the language was so different. It ain't that way today with the kids in Louisiana. Everybody kind of speak American. But back then, there were languages like in South Carolina, didn't sound like North Carolina. And Louisiana and Florida absolutely didn't sound like Alabama and Mississippi. It was completely different among black people.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, being that it was so different, what is it that drew you to move out of Louisiana?
I guess because Lord and Miss Claudia had no language barrier. The white kids, the black kids, blue, purple, they all loved Lord and Miss Claudia. It was kind of like the beginning of rock and roll. And every rock and roll artist after me, which, I think the first one was 3 years, I think it was Elvis, 3 years after I did Lord and Miss Claudia, have recorded Lord and Miss Claudia. The Beatles, Paul McCartney, Fats Domino, John Lennon, the U2, Neil Diamond, they all recorded my music. Little Richard, Fats Domino, James Brown, Wilson Pickett. Over and over and over, they recorded my music. So I kind of thought, in the 50s when I did Personality at 59, I said, maybe I could do this stuff.
Well, and also the Replacements and a lot of other modern bands covered the song, which has kept it alive.
Oh, yeah, The Who, Stagger Lee has been recorded 429 times after I did it.
So what I'm curious about is when somebody is a pioneer in their genre and they have such huge success early on, and at a certain point, that's what you're most known for. At what point did you start to embrace the fact that you were a pioneer as opposed to trying to create the latest and the greatest?
Well, I believe it was in 1960 at the BMI Awards dinner. Every name they called was my name or Phil Spector's name. And then I realized, what am I going to do with all these awards? And Motown was on the rise. And then Memphis was beginning to kick in. I started feeling all this stuff coming behind me. 4 years later, I started looking for somewhere to park the band. I knew Don King out in Cleveland, so I had him he built a club where I could park my band. He built the Corner Tavern. The Optimum was just as good as the Copacabana on 78th and Cedar in the ghetto in Cleveland. But it was a great place to park my band because we started to integrate Cleveland. They would come to that club. And then in 1967, when Morris Levy gave up Birdland, I realized that I could be the first big black rock and roll club on Broadway. And so I took the lease and built a turntable on Broadway and parked the band in there for 4 years. So it was not really that difficult because my crowds would drop from 5,000 to 3,000. I was paying attention. That's what I always paid attention to, what was happening. Of course, I had a good guy with me, Harold Logan. Have you noticed he's on most of all my songs? I made him my partner. He was a number guy from Cleveland to be my administrator. From West Virginia. He was my administrator of my company. So we kept noticing how things, would reduce itself, where we would draw 1,700 people every day at the Apollo. We started drawing 1,200 and 1,300. If you just start watching that drop, you can kind of keep up with it.
Yeah,
I don't know if that makes sense, but that's the way I did it.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So you just mentioned, he was your numbers guy. You're known to be an excellent businessman between the icon food brands. You've accomplished a lot in real estate. Is he to credit for these great business decisions, or were you a street smart guy?
Well, believe it or not, these guys who was in the number business, like Don King, there was another guy called Scatterbrands, and Harold Logan, they all were friends. And I was like their junior. They would kind of say, man, you don't want to go that way. You want to go this way. They didn't have any PhDs, which I now have honorary, but they was the guys that I listened to, my mentors. These guys were smart. And to prove how smart they was, if you would equate Lotto as it is now, and these guys who ran these number businesses in the ghetto, you see how smart they were. When Lotto is $600 million, these guys kind of knew what they was doing. They bought all the houses, they had the garages, they had, they just used mother wit. It was and common sense. And I think that's the way the world was built, because there was no colleges when they built in this universe. I mean, it was, who ever heard of college or school? And I think with common sense, you can kind of like put the common denominator together. A 10 by 10 room needs certain foundation, and if you're going to go up, you just double it. And that's kind of what I did.
And then where did, Icon food brands come from?
Because there was a need for it. I would go into these stores, and I never would see black product on the shelves in Walmart or Target or anywhere like that. And there was the Chamber of Commerce in Washington would write about it all the time. And I would read what they say. They say, black folks spends $670 million a week or a month from 19 to 34 at Walmart, and then they age on out. And I kept paying attention to that. So I realized, I went down to Bentonville and met with Walmart, and they asked me, what do you have to go on our shelves? We got 68,000 vendors. What do you have we don't have? And that's when I told them a sweet potato cookie. And in 5 minutes, they ordered it. I had to really start putting that together, because I knew how to do it, but I had to get a company to make that product for me. And I found a company in Clear Lake, Iowa, that made my cookies, and we was in Walmart.
Wow. So do you have a favorite of the Lottie Miss Claudie food products?
Yeah, the cookie, the sweet potato cookie. Because my father, he used to make, he didn't make that. He made a thing like it was a triangle, and he'd put that sweet potato sauce in the middle of it. And that was one of the greatest things I'd ever tasted. And I said, well, maybe I could take that particular way he made that. I watched him all the time and make a cookie. And I came up with a formula for a sweet potato cookie. Only difference, instead of using the real sweet potato, we use sweet potato chips to make the cookie, because we're the shelf life. That is one thing I hadn't considered. But we got the shelf life in the cookie to last more than 90 days, which was excellent. Walmart was able to put it on the shelves right with Mrs. Fields cookies. And we outsold Mrs. Fields. I only had 12 cookies in the bag. She had 16, 18. And my cookie was 1 ounce, individually wrapped, weighed, I had 12 cookies in the bag, and it lasted 90 days. So I was quite happy. We was in Walmart for about 4 years until they wanted to reduce the price and put more cookies in the bag and reduce the size of the cookie. And I have not yet agreed to do that. And so we're not in Walmart at the moment.
Sounds like you're doing fine without them. Do you have any other entrepreneurial ventures besides the food brands?
Actually, no. What I started to do was go back into the music business, even though it's as tough as driving a nail through a piece of steel today. But I looked at it very carefully. I looked at all my compadres are gone, and I'm probably the last man standing on the runway, that can do it all. You know, with the big band, I could do the rock and roll, I could do the ballads, I could do it all. And that is one of the reasons why I did This Is Rock and Roll, to do probably all the universities, and I know my history pretty good. I could, even go to colleges and talk. I kind of know about this stuff. So I said, well, I reintroduced myself with a new record and call it what I do. This is my brand, rock and roll. And I can talk about that. I can talk about that for 60 years of how it all happened. I knew all of the players. I was a leader most of my life in this business, including Motown, Al Bella. They always come to me for information about, at one time or another, about record business, about publishing. I had the biggest, besides Don Roby and Peacock down in Texas, I was the next largest black publishing business in America in the 60s.
Well, is there an accomplishment that you're still working towards, knowing all that?
Working toward now, at what I do. I can't think of doing nothing else better than doing my music. And so every day is an accomplishment. Talking to you is an accomplishment. Because I ask myself every morning, which one of God's blessings can you deny? You can't deny any, whether they're good or bad. So I just keep going.
Cool. So I guess in closing, any last words for the kids?
Yes. If you got to ask yourself your question. Do not feel bad if somebody says you made a mistake, because it isn't. You cannot rush the experience. If you've never done it before, it's not a mistake. You learn something every day when you wake up, you learn something new. And I would say if you got a craft that you really love, keep doing it, because nobody knows what's in your head but you.
Wow. Okay. Well, that was a great answer. All these were great answers. Thank you. This has been an honor.
Thank you so much.
Paltrocast.